Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my podcast. I'm Jeff Berlin. Thank you so much for coming back to listen to me chat about, I guess, all things bass, things that I find interesting about bass and learning bass. And I'm here with Sarah Childress. Hello, Sarah.
Hey, Jeff. How's it going?
Good. I'm glad you're here, Sarah, as she's sort of the yang to my yin, or the Vanzetti to my Sacco.
Nicely put.
I know. It's a weird analogy, but I will ramble and go off north, south, east, and west. And Sarah, who is grounded in making sure that the subjects are discussed factually and hopefully with a little bit of entertainment, I need her, and I'm glad she's here to keep me on the track.
Thank you.
So I'm glad you're here, and I don't know. I thought we'd begin. I've been writing columns now, I should say posts, on a website called The Bass Guitar that I found on Facebook. And my past experience with blogs and such had not been very successful. I'm banned permanently from talk bass and have been for years. And it turned out that this occurred. I may as well just sort of explain this for people who might be interested to know. I've never been shy to explain that there is a before therapy Jeff Berlin and an after therapy Jeff Berlin. And the before therapy Jeff was combative, but when I got onto talk bass, people were immediately hard and pointed, rude. You so-and-so, you such and such. And the moderators never stepped in to quell that kind of interaction that people were writing and producing, directed at me. And I lost my temper and cursed everybody out, again, pre-therapy. And I mean cursed everyone, I mean including the moderators for not treating me fairly. And I was subsequently banned for life. Now, wasn't a pleasant thing. I certainly had my part in it. But after coming to a little bit of balance in my life, I happened to find this bass group called The Bass Guitar, and I found it on Facebook. And while there, I've been entertaining, sort of discussing the same things that I've been discussing for years, because these subjects have not been resolved. People still have difficulty with playing, still have difficulty with learning. And the subject matter that I used to pontificate about still exists. But the difference is, Sarah, is that with this group of guys, they're the fairest, most kind, most available to say, what an interesting point, Jeff. I may not agree with this. I find that such and such is the case. And I'll respond, well, I understand. I think that's nice. I'll think about that too. And in this particular relationship, we are extremely deferential, kind, open, agreeing, not agreeing. And for a lot of the time, many people say, oh my goodness, I didn't think about it that way. Because I have an ability to see things in a manner that most bass players don't, just due to, is pedigree the word? No, it's probably more training, isn't it?
Well, just experience, training, and also, as an educator too. You have to develop a particular pedagogical approach, and developing curriculum or curricula is one thing, but learning how to share your learning and share your constructions and your knowledge with someone else. It's not just like, here, do this, but rather it's creating that opportunity for growth, creating conversation that isn't about combat or my way is the highway,
right?
But rather, these are some things that I've thought about and I put into practice myself and that I found works, and I want to share it, and I also want to open up opportunities for people once they come into contact with these things to share their ideas and their responses and their experiences. And certainly, as you say, and I'm sure it's true in the bass website that you're in now, and I will say specifically about Jeff Berlin Bass Education, which is where I spend most of my time.
Right.
Oh my gosh, the guys are just amazing. It's such a wonderful community. It's so supportive, and they're all really kind to each other, and there's just really wonderful interaction. So I'm glad that you're finding that to be true everywhere. But certainly being involved in helping to create that kind of community is wonderful. So I know even since I've known you, and gosh, how long has that been? It's not quite a year yet, but we're
No.
getting there. You know, your tone has changed, I know, in communications. And I know you and I even had a conversation about tone very early on, because our tones are somewhat different.
Right.
But I think, you know,
Oh, I
we're
remember
kind of,
that, yeah.
exactly. But I think, you know, producing the kind of tone that is, you know, supportive and conducive for learning, and also for feeling safe to be vulnerable in a learning process, because it can be hard to not know how to do something and admit it.
Oh, sure.
And to seek help. So that's one of the other things I think is so wonderful, is that people feel comfortable and safe enough to share that vulnerability and open themselves up for those kinds of exchanges.
I totally agree. I learned from you, certainly learned from John, certainly learned from Gabby, learned a lot from my Beth Meeker, the person who put me on this path. I learned from people who have shared thoughts. Vic DeWooten had taught me a lot about the sort of the kinder manner of interacting, and I took a lot from him in that regard, in that manner I owe him. And so I like the fact that a man nearly about 2 months away from Medicare, that I'm actually in the greatest uplift of joy and happiness I've ever had. I was not a happy man for, I would say, my whole life, but my upbringing, the roots grew a twisted and distorted a person, and it's evident in any post or any comment or any debate or any interaction one can find on the internet up until about a couple of years ago. There's nothing that I can defend, nor wish to, nor will attempt to, in regards to my attitude. So what is great for me is that I can share thoughts and be kind about it. But I'll tell you something else. I haven't backed off at all, not one iota, not one crumb of the views that I have, because even as I learn more about music and learn about playing, it really is clear to me that something is not right in bass education. And the reason that I may be more aware of it than anybody else, or most anybody else, or other people, is, and forgive me, folks, I'm going to talk about this for a second, is that, and you can research this, people, if you wish to. I don't think that there's a bass player like me anywhere who has the background where I was deeply trained in classical violin for 10 years, then became a self-taught rocker in the 60s. I went to Berkeley during a time where Berkeley only taught musical content, nothing but musical content. And the ironic thing is, my view is that learn from music only, practice only music, don't work on groove and metronomes, etc. These were messages, quite frankly, taught to me by Berkeley teachers when I came in as a rock bass player, digging on Jack Bruce. And I said, let's play these lines I created. Let me try to create this stuff. And they said to me, and I remember this, I see their faces. I can't remember their names because they were just temporary teachers at the time. But they had the insight to say, no, Jeff, you got to learn music, read music, practice the etudes. So my attitude that I have, quite frankly, is born out of the Berkeley introduction that music itself, only music, nothing but music counts. And then when I left school, I would subsequently study with different teachers, and then finally ended up with Charlie Benakis, where I spent literally an on and off relationship with him for almost 35 years.
Oh, wow.
And, well, I would go and come. I'd be on tour. I'd be gone 6 months. I'd go back to Charlie. And Charlie had a waiting list, 2 years.
Wow.
And I would write him, and he'd always put me at the top. Sorry, folks. We had a good friendship going, and he respected what I did. And I studied with him for 35 years. And so what I'm saying is I might be the only oddball of my kind in that. I'm not a better bass player than anybody else. I'm never going to say that. I'm not a better person. I'm not a better bass player. What I may be is better prepared in understanding how academic music functions. And perhaps people can check this out, see if somebody is equal or has a similar sort of 60 years. I mean, I'm about to enter into a new study pro. I got a teacher up there at Belmont I'm going to study composition with. It doesn't end for me. So in that, I don't really want musicians to come up to my level in understanding of music. The truth is that if I learn one note correctly, it's equal to my learning 10 bars of a Beethoven symphony. There's no difference except in the difficulty and the quantity of information learned. Learning is really quite simple, and that's what I wanted to share. And that's why I have a problem with base education, because I feel they've taken what is extremely simple situation, an extremely simple situation, and complicated it. Now, we'll get into that longer, but that's my reasons. That's my background. I'm sticking to it, and I think I'm going to cry. I'm very.
You're getting yourself all worked up.
I got it off my chest in public. So, anything to add, or shall I read this thing here? Or,
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I on the website, I went way around the barn to get back to this. On the bass guitar, a gentleman asked, should I say his name?
Sure. Why
Okay.
not?
Paul C.K. Armstrong wrote, among other things in his post, he said, I am curious as to how you bridge the gap of needing to learn styles by yourself, but start the theory on the left, as you say. What the left is my description of the path of learning of a musician. If you take a piece of paper and you draw a horizontal line from the left side of the paper to the right, the left side represents the time in one's musical life where we learn how to play. We learn the notes, we learn where they are on the neck, and really the only proven method really to do this is reading music. There's other methods that work, but the proven method is reading music. Going to the right, meaning going down the line as you get better and better as a bass player, eventually groove, feel, time, heart, art, interpretation, creativity become a part of the style, becomes part of the learning process. And what happens is he wants to know, how do you rectify being an academically trained musician to the left and dealing with styles? 2 points. Bass education, in my opinion, has made an error by taking the elements that belong on the right side of the line and always have belonged on the right side of the line and have transferred them over to the left. So instead of learning that this is G minor and A minor with no emotion or any reason for it except that it exists, this is a verb. We learned a verb. Nobody ever said use the verb. How do I apply a verb? You learn the verbs, and our grammar improved. But bass educators have transported right line principles over to the beginning and left line principles where they don't belong. So when you go into education, well, let's talk about groove. Let's talk about a metronome. I want you to practice with a metronome. I want you to play with feel. I want you to create your own bass lines. A lot of bass teachers have, in my opinion, erroneously assigned walking bass line writing assignments to students who aren't qualified to do it. There's a way around that. But there's a lot of things related. Rock performance, groove performance, emphasizing groove. What was the other ones? Gospel music, blues music, rock music, funk music, R&B music. The playing and expression of music are all at the beginning of the line where only factual music should be there. And how do I know? Because the entire classical world is taught that way, if you're not self-taught. So, to answer this gentleman, the way you rectify and the way you deal with this is that if you can get into a mechanically functional academic system, which is entirely based on facts of music for no other reason than the facts exist, just like we all got into the facts of reading and writing, only because those facts exist. We wrote sentences, I will go to the store. We didn't write sentences, I will to the store, will go.
Well, but see, okay, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate here.
Play devil.
Because since I'm an educator as well, though in film and not in music, so I'm going to show my ignorance with music education. But this has always been a little bit of a debate between you and I because we're very different in terms of our teaching styles. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I teach a class, I'm all about applied learning. So I am not as much interested in, okay, write this sentence 100 times or read this sentence 100 times and basically get it in, like incorporate it into your body and your understanding and your knowledge. Rather, here's something that will allow you to apply those particular ideas so that you have a personal invested interest in it and you're learning how to use these tools in the pursuit of an applied design, of a particular kind of application. So I will tell my students, okay, so we're learning about this particular era in film history, or we're learning about this particular approach to documentary. So I'm going to teach you the fundamentals, but then I want you to learn them and incorporate them into your own understanding, your own quote vocabulary, by going out and actually putting them into use, which I know is a little bit, that's a different approach than what you have. So I'm wondering, in the whole sort of different strokes for different folks,
Right,
that clearly
right.
there's no right or wrong. Everyone teaches in a different way, just as people sometimes learn in a different way. For example, I'm a visual learner. I take in all my information visually, and that's how I comprehend more easily. And also for me, being a more language-oriented person, the diagramming sentences, is terrible in grammar, but to read and to express myself through writing, that was when language really came alive for me. So I'm just wondering, for people like me who are interested in applications, is there a way that we can have our cake and eat it too?
You've opened up a lot of interesting thoughts. I'm not sure I'm going to try to remember them all, but I'm going to go back to the fact that we all teach differently and we all learn differently. And that is, of course, a very popular premise in education. But I'm going to refer to learning how to drive as one example where no matter how we learned, and no matter how our intention and our manner to learn was best functioned for us, we were taught exactly the same way, basically, according to the rules of each state, how to drive a car. There wasn't really much an interpretation. Now, I look over my shoulder this way, but you could look over your shoulder that way. Wasn't exactly an applicable or necessary point to discuss. To drive a car, you put it into drive, you release the brake, and there wasn't any question about it. If you go to referring to your thing about what you do as a movie.
You could call me a muse if you want to.
A muse? I hate muses to muses.
I guess it would me saying amuse sounds like a move.
You're amused.
I'm amused.
Well, you're a muse in film art. Now, just using the term art, I'll assume that a lot of the students you have already have some background in film to some degree. The ice has been broken.
Well, they're self-taught.
They're self-taught
Many of
in
them are
that.
self-taught.
And I'm not sure that there is a hard written approach for teaching interpretation of film, historic film. I'm not sure, you'll correct me, that you look at the Citizen Kane and it is mandated that you teach it how to regard it this way.
But you can teach it many different ways.
That's sort of the point,
Yeah.
in that you can. This applies to the subject that you teach. When you have a bass guitar in your hands, the problem I feel in bass education is bass teachers agree entirely with you. You could learn a million different ways. It's like they use in fact, one teacher, I won't name him, said, there's many ways to get from New York to LA.
Which is true.
There is. So I have to admit, and I will have to admit, there are many ways to get from New York to LA. I could fly to London, take a train down to Paris, get the ferry to Marseille, go back under the channel to England, catch a flight to Mexico City and get up to LA. That is absolutely an available way for me to get from New York to LA. Another way you can get from LA to New York to LA is get on a plane in New York and arrive in LA. Now, in that, people have the idea that because there are many ways, they are as meaningful, which they are, justifiable, I don't agree. So, justifiable, and then some guy will come on, well, what if you want to see, Madrid? Well, that wasn't mentioned. The thing was gone from New York to LA. There are many roads. I always thought taking the straight road was the road that most people intended to get them there and with the least trouble. Nobody likes driving in traffic, So what happens is that your particular approach to movie discussion is an interpretable one. I think that Cain represented Judas in chapter so and so in the Bible. How can you tell me I'm wrong?
You can't. That's the point.
But if I say this is a G, and this finger plays that G, if somebody says, well, you can also play that G with a rolling pin, while hanging out a window, that guy isn't wrong either. So here's the thing. It's not right or wrong. It's appropriate. It's time saving. It's organized, and gives us the best results possible. And if that's enough of a definition, I will go further and say that almost all approaches to learning bass are not going to get players what they want when you start at the left of the line, because the left of the line is an entirely fact-gathering experience. You go to a boxing class, which I used to do. We did not get in the gym and in the ring and start sparring. Put your right foot here, put your left foot here. Now put this thing here. We always threw with the elbow up in the air. The guy says, put the elbow down. But it's a choice. I can put the elbow up.
Well, but you're learning proper form.
And proper form, beautifully said, is exactly attributable to the playing of an instrument. And the form that's attributable is that this is a G and it needs to be played. And there's no way around it. Now, here's an interesting thought. I don't know if I discussed it in the last podcast. If somebody says, I'm not into music, or I don't into G and major and minor and harmony, the ironic thing is, in every style of popular music, there's a G chord in there somewhere. There is a G chord. There isn't a minor chord. And logic, to me, says that if I'm going to go to a music school, I want to learn what those G chord notes are, so then I might be able to play G in another way. And secondly, and this sort of works to the academic that beep, 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 that I think it was CK mentioned, the gentleman who wrote, is that when you learn mechanically, it's the easiest job in the world because it's Simon Says. Simon Says, play da-da-da-da-da. That's it. Simon didn't say memorize it. Simon didn't say make an artistic statement out of it. Simon didn't say to play it in time. Simon didn't say to put a metronome on it. Simon said to ba, 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 ba. And counting is part of the mandate of reading music. It has its own tempo. And then, since all music has major, minor, and these elements, what happens is we begin to see a harmonically boring, non-emotional term of music, relate to it as it exists, practicing it, which makes us a better bass player by understanding the music. Now, how do you learn the blues? How do you learn rock? How do you learn funk? How do you learn slap? And this is where I would invite people to check out the statistics. You go online, look around. Just about 100% of all rockers that have any success, just about, and all slappers, 100%, all, funk, blues, those type of guys, all acquired their skills by being self-taught. I just don't think anybody can find an example to the contrary. Some guys are already capable players. They'll go to a couple of the music schools. They'll graduate the schools and have a career and may attribute what they learned to the schools. But I'm convinced, having known several of these guys firsthand, I knew a bunch of them before they got to this. I won't mention the other school. The schools, they went in, they didn't really learn there, but when they got out, of course they were happy, which is where I feel many musicians confuse learning with the spiritual joy. I loved every second of it. I practiced with this guy and I learned all this stuff. No, you didn't. You enjoyed and I'm being this blunt because I've seen these people up close. They already could play. What the joy is people love the experience. That's my opinion. I mean, people can refute it, and I won't argue because right here I'm speaking my opinion. But since 100% of nearly everybody that learned how to play is self-taught, it behooves you to think, why would you spend money to learn the same topics in school for quite a bit of money, or with a teacher for quite a bit of money, or be lectured about it in a clinic, when everybody learned it for free? I can't put my head together how it is, I guess, that a generation of bass players have missed the point that since everybody that slaps, let's say, is self-taught, why go to a teacher to teach you slap when they learned it on their own anyway? And in this logic, it occurred to me that I wouldn't go to a school or a teacher or anywhere if musical content, the left side of the line, was not mandatorily taught first, and then you can pursue the jams and the records and the art form, because learning music never means you replace it with anything you love to play. If you love rock standing on your head and putting mayo on the neck, do it. But in the daytime, I want you to learn da 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 da, because they aren't related. Learning and playing are not related. And learning is a factual thing, and like Sarah suggested, everybody teaches differently. In music education, that's the problem. Because, let's say in Spanish lessons, for the most part, teachers don't teach differently. You conjugate a verb. I mean, this book says conjugate it a little like this or like that. No, it's basically the same principles. You conjugate a verb. Yo voy a la playa. Tú vas a la playa. Nosotros vamos a la playa. And the mechanical learning. Ahora, después de aprender mi español, yo tuve que practicarlo por años y yo pasaba tiempo con los latinos y al fin yo podría comunicar y expresar mi corazón, mis pensamientos sin pensar. Now, if you don't know what I said, it is a flow of Spanish that I started to learn when I was 35 years old. I learned it mechanically. Learning it mechanically and then being self-taught by hanging out with my second wife's family. They were Venezuelan. And I only spent time, when I spent time talking Spanish, and I made a complete and utter ass out of myself for several years talking like an idiot. But I'd sit in that kitchen and I would sit with those people and I would talk with those people, and they were patient and they listened to me. So learn content and learn self-taught.
Yeah, well, and I want to kind of go back to that, to what you were saying about just, hanging out and actually practicing, which that goes back to what I was saying earlier with an application of the fundamentals that you're learning. And so I'm wondering if with some of the experiences that you're talking about is basically creating a framework around let's just say providing deadlines and opportunities for people to immerse themselves in situations and also to immerse themselves in learning. Because a lot of people are like, well, I'll do it tomorrow. But when you go to school and you're paying money, it's also sometimes an opportunity just to be kind of like forced into doing something. So for example, I have some students who come to class and I have some students who don't come to class. I have some students who turn in their assignments and don't turn in their assignments. But regardless, I'm giving them opportunities to practice the fundamentals and also providing a framework for them to both learn what I'm teaching them, but also to engage in their own self-taught practice in a more disciplined way than they might otherwise have. Right. So that was one point I wanted to make. And also to go back to your metaphor about learning how to drive, because that's certainly right if you're learning how to drive an automatic transmission. But when I was learning how to drive a stick shift, some of that it's true, there are certain mechanics that are involved, but I had to learn feel. I had to learn touch. I had to understand from myself so that I could actually develop that feel for, okay, the clutch is just, it's just engaged. I can now shift. It took me a while to learn the stick shift. And once I got it, I could drive the heck out of that car, but it took me some time to get that feel. So certainly there, you can practice one note and another and all together and in different combinations. But I've been watching you long enough to know that your fingerings are different. Your timing is different. You'll play these etudes in a different way depending upon what take. So it's not like just watching, you're not a mechanical man who just goes da 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 da. Like that's not who you are. Like you're playing the same notes, but you are playing them differently depending upon the moment and the time, etc. So there is a little, I guess I like to give a little room for the spirit and the sort of the personal creativity, and also the understanding that we're not mechanical people, and sometimes we've got to get the feel of something, the touch of something. Sure. I mean, you were actually helping me one day by teaching me how to more gently hold a guitar neck, like stop with the death grip. And so you had to help me change my touch and my relationship to the instrument. So that can be a part of it.
It is a part of it. It's a mandated part. You don't just sit down and say, sit, read, go. So I didn't feel it was necessary to mention it, but I'm glad that you brought it up. A teacher will look at a student and say, well, let's put the hand here, let's lighten the touch there, Now read the notes, because it's all about the notes. The notes are the jump-off point. In the fact that the notes are the jump-off point at the same juncture, you as a clutch driving student really couldn't be taught more than a couple of little instances that you got to move the pedal forward, the right foot, while gently relaxing the left. It's a feel thing. But let's establish where we are today. Everyone drives an automatic car. So the mechanics has changed, so it isn't necessary. But the driving methods, the driving principles, you're talking about operating a car. Hold on. Hey, Clapton, I told you not to call me when I'm on the radio. Who's that? Okay, I don't know who it was. That Clapton, he never leaves me alone.
I know, he's constantly, he calls, he writes.
All the time. Him and McCartney, why don't they just get a life? So your principles are mechanical, and the instruction was rather probably terse. You gently step and you gently relax. In bass, it's rather easy. Here's a G. Put your middle finger there. Play it. Okay. Now I notice that you're pressing too hard, and then I will give it little points of instruction. And some people do learn faster or slower than others, and you have to take that into account. Mm-hmm. So it isn't boot camp per se in that you have till 3 o'clock to learn this music. Mm-hmm. All I'm emphasizing is that in the academic, the paying of, the pursuit of an education, it appears to me, at least even by historical precedents, that the only beneficial and the only guaranteed way that any of us ever learn how to improve if we choose to study with a teacher is to be taught musical content. And the reason I validate it is because for 3 centuries I say, that other than all the self-taught musicians, 100% of all musicians in Western society were taught by music. 100%. People at homes that were, in small in neighborhoods that learned a new Beethoven piece. Beethoven sold sheet music and made a living because everybody learned music. Mm-hmm. It is the music itself that literally taught the whole generations of people in Europe until it came to America. How to read music. Stephen Foster wrote, "Day Down Upon the Swanee River," was a written piece. Mm-hmm. Do you know that George Gershwin spent his entire childhood in a tenement flat in New York and learned how to compose and play?
Wow.
From one teacher, I can't recall his name. These people were all taught musical content. It's the only method that works. Period. It doesn't matter if people agree or not. Mm-hmm. Because it isn't my opinion. It's a historically validatable point. Mm-hmm. And then bass players got together and said, we're not going to do that anymore. Now everybody's different, and we'll teach them differently. They'll teach, which I think is a horrendous attitude to take, because we're really not that different. And again, our teaching in English, I know you're more visual, but through whatever means it was not comfortable to you, today you can read perfectly, you can write perfectly, and from those academic lessons that even for you were not comfortable, you can express your heart and your art and your emotions in written form. So there is a legacy between learning academics and learning it well, mm-hmm. and noticing that somehow in the human experience, probably through the self-taught speaking and hanging, mm-hmm. you became a writer. We all are. Every post I've ever gotten on Facebook was written by someone who learned how to read and write English, talking about Americans at this time, mm-hmm. maybe English people or New Zealanders, Australians, possibly, We all learned how to read and write the same way, practically with the same material. So when bass teachers say, well, you're different, you should be learned differently. I mean, I'm sorry, I consider it a lie and a misguided recommendation. One thing is, one teacher stated, well, you're a great teacher, Jeff, but you're the right teacher for the right student. And I find that a gross statement, because this person that uttered this was realizing that you as a funker and he is a jazzer and this guy is a rocker, mm-hmm. wants to learn differently. But what the teacher and what all teachers seemingly don't see is that in jazz, funk, rock, blues, and cha-cha, is a G major chord. And that's the literal point that teachers have never been able to view. So the nature that the right teacher for the right student is foolish, and I can say I can teach anybody, any style, anywhere, anytime, and anybody like me can. As I said, I'm trained more deeply perhaps than other people. And there is another notion, and I would like to share, and I'm not being critical to be critical. The methods don't line up to me. People are very verbal about opinions about Donald Trump today, and very verbal about the racist attitudes, and very verbal about the morals that go on in the world today and what we're doing. There's no hesitation in expressing these things. So, in my case, I am verbal about the function of a system, not people. And I hope that's clear. I don't like to hurt people. I don't want to hurt anybody. But there is a popular notion that here's something I'd like to show you guys. It worked for me. It might not work for you. And the sentiment does two things for me. One, it makes the teacher not responsible for what he's showing. And secondly, and this is where I got to make clear, anything that worked for me, I will guarantee anybody 100% of it will work for you. And the reason is because we all share in common the exact same need to know what the notes are and where they are on the neck. We're not talking about jazz, funk, rock, playing in a gig, playing with a drummer, playing with a click track, writing a song. We're not referring to that. That's the right side of the horizontal line that base education in all the major schools and all the major teachers has grabbed up and had redeposited at the beginning of the horizontal line where they do not belong. Bass players pay a lot of money, come out of school. I had I don't know if I'm getting a little too wound up.
Well, so I'll just, before you go on to the anecdote, I find it, first of all, very, very interesting in the schemata that you've drawn for us, that first of all, it's like a reading schemata, where we read from left to right in the Western tradition.
Not in Israel, but everywhere.
Not in the Western, well, that's true. But also it's very interesting. It almost sounds like you're talking about a return to fundamentals. So how would you describe the system that you're talking about? I mean, is it foundational? Is it fundamental? I mean, you're almost making it sound like it's regressive, like you start here and you end here, but the ending is being put on the beginning, and the beginning isn't at the beginning where it should be. So,
and that's the way it goes. It's not. I'm not suggesting anything that hasn't existed and doesn't exist to this day. That's the ironic thing. Everything I'm saying is a duh in the classical world. Absolutely a duh. It's the same principles that are a duh, and I don't mean duh in a derogatory.
Oh, sure.
I can't think of a synonym, just like duh. I mean, yeah, you got to learn those. It's the same principles that work in arranging composition. It's the same principles that work in academic training, like I say, of classical music, the drum books. Look at any drummer book, and for the most part, it's left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right. There's no art there. In my thoughts and comments, the idea is that I'm trying to get bass players to understand that the things that I'm talking about, one, I didn't make up. A lot of guys write, like, explain your method. I don't have a method. I genuinely don't, and I never did. All that I'm doing is referring to a system of teaching that provides the only guarantee. There isn't any other system that guarantees this. That the only guarantee that everybody has an equal chance at musical improvement is to read music.
Well, but you have created a system from a system, because you do have a system.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
you have a base course. You
Yes, I do.
designed a base course. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Correct.
And clearly for the non-readers, it definitely behooves them to start at 1. And I know from those 24 lessons, I've seen those 24 lessons, and I myself, as a non-reader, have learned a lot from just looking at those 24 lessons. So there's a sense in which, you would say for non-readers, start at 1 for sure. But then when it seems like to me, and I'm asking this
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm very
yeah.
much interested, for people who are proficient readers. And I know when we're talking 3, 4, and 5, we've got the various scales, we've got chord tones, we've got approach notes. So how are you seeing your system of the system working in terms of like a process or
Good.
progress, and how 3, 4, and 5 relate to 1 and 2, or even how 2 relates to 1, and how you would suggest people interact with the system that you've created?
I think that's great. What I created was based on a system that I never created. What I created was I took just facts of learning that anybody in my shoes knows. I'm well far from alone in this, except in the bass world I seem to be. The system I created is that bass players don't know how to choose the appropriate music to learn from. They don't have the skill. I don't know the appropriate way to teach myself, triple bypass surgery, or anything related to blood or hemoglobin, or I don't know how to teach myself. Where do you start? I did that for bass players who want to save themselves 25 years of wondering, because it's that first year of getting into it, and then afterward you can't unlearn what you've learned. You have basically a full life benefit from it. And what it began as is whole notes, because there's nothing simpler than a whole note. And I not only did whole notes, I did whole notes on one string, then whole notes on the another. I did whole notes on the E, then whole notes on the A, then whole notes on the D, and then whole notes on the G. And there's only 3 notes per string. And I began there, and it could have even been simpler. I could have played an E, just an E. But you see, by the 3rd bar, they've got it.
Sure.
So I said, well, what do I do to make it at least minimally more interesting? And so what I did is, let's say on the first string, I took E, F, and G. And repeated an etude. E, F, G, G, F, F, G, E, G, G, F, E, E, G, E, E, F, E, G, G. Next line. G, G, F, F, E. And what happens is that eventually the guy or the girl is going to say, I've had enough of this. You know what that means? They learned E, F, and G.
It's like time to move on.
Time to move on. Now it's A, B, C. And then you do that for till you're ready to get sick. And then you go to D, E, F, and you do that for a while. And then you go G, A, not B flat, but B. So for the first time, you're playing open string, middle finger, and 4th finger.
Okay.
Will that get you a gig? No. Will that teach you how to play with feeling? No. Will it help you to express yourself? No. Well, is it developing your ears? Not in a measurable manner. And what I want to do to wrap up this particular podcast is to mention that when you read a note and you see what that note is, you have connected your eye, your brain, your nervous system, your hand, and your instrument in one sequence firing of recognition of pitch and relating it to instrument. That simple explanation explains how everybody that plays 1,000,000 notes an hour can do it. Because if they can play blah, 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 and know what the notes are, believe me when I tell you, it all began with, somewhere down in the back in their past, it began somewhere with E, F, and G. So my packages and what I've done here is to cut out every extraneous piece of fat that it is possible to cut out to get musicians sitting in front of music, looking at the music, reading the notes, figuring out what the note is both rhythmically and pitch-wise, and playing it on the bass neck. And if you do this every day for a few months, you will double and triple your playing. It's like doing push-ups and wondering if you're going to get muscles. Like I said, I think that in another podcast. It's like going on a diet. Am I going to lose weight? It's like saving money. Is the interest going to add up? It all bodes to yes. And this is going to change your life, because now I'll brag. I don't think there's a bass system anywhere in the world like mine, because I came from such an academic background, and I know what everybody needs. I know exactly what you need because I needed the same thing. We're not different. I never understood how that philosophy got taken on as a meaningful point of view. You may learn faster or slower, or you may begin in the middle where another guy begins a little earlier. But the principles are the same. We are not different. And we weren't when we learned English, and we weren't when we learned math. So that's my thinking. I hope it makes sense. And All I want to do is help. I always have to feel a caveat here. I'm not trying to hurt schools or teachers. I just feel that there is a problem here. And in the early days, or whenever I talked about it with teachers, they didn't want to know at all where I was coming from, and still don't. I don't mean harm, but if you'll be patient with me on these podcasts, I'm going to be talking about methods and systems. And hopefully, no matter what I say, you will respect and understand that I have no intention of saying so-and-so teaches and such a school supports. That is not my intention, because I do not want to cause harm. I want to cause change.
Well, that seems like the perfect place to end this particular podcast.
Okay.
So,
this is Sarah Childress sitting next to me right here.
I didn't know if you wanted me to say, and this is Jeff Berlin.
but say it in that voice that I love so dearly.
This is Jeff Berlin.
Hey, thank you very much.
Exactly.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Absolutely.
Next time.
We'll see you next time, or you'll hear us next
You'll
time.
hear us next time.
Yeah.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.